I'm Haley, 28, and I just woke up in a hospital bed looking like something out of a medical drama. Tubes everywhere, monitors beeping like an aggressive alarm clock, and not a single familiar face in sight. The doctor just finished telling me I collapsed at work and they called my emergency contacts 12 times. 12. My family was apparently too busy to pick up. I maintained my composure, thanked the medical staff politely, and asked for my phone. That's when I made the mistake of opening Instagram. Where are you watching from today? Drop your location in the comments below and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever felt completely abandoned by the people who should care most. You'll definitely want to stick around for what happened next. Let me back up and tell you how I ended up here, hooked to machines while my loving family enjoyed bottomless mimosas at the Ritz-Carlton. 3 days ago, I was just another 28-year-old working in corporate finance, managing spreadsheets and pretending to care about quarterly projections. I'd been feeling dizzy lately, more tired than usual, but who has time to slow down when you're covering everyone else's bills, right? Tuesday morning started normally. Coffee, emails, the usual routine of making other people money while barely keeping my head above water. Around 10 during our monthly budget meeting, the room started spinning. Not the gentle kind of dizzy you get from standing up too fast. This was full-blown carnival ride spinning. I gripped the conference table trying to focus on my boss's voice, but everything started going fuzzy around the edges. The last thing I remember was someone saying my name, then darkness. Complete, embarrassing, face first into the conference table darkness. Apparently, I gave my coworkers quite the show. Nothing says professional like collapsing during a PowerPoint presentation about profit margins. When the paramedics arrived, they found my emergency contact information in my phone. Mom, Dad, my sister Emma, all listed as people who supposedly cared about my well-being. The hospital staff started making calls while I was unconscious. Ring, ring, voicemail, ring, ring, voicemail. 12 attempts to reach my family, and every single call went unanswered or was dismissed with excuses about being unavailable. Here's where it gets really special. Dr. Martinez, bless her honest soul, decided to fill me in on those conversations. Your sister said you're dramatic and always making a big deal out of nothing, she told me with the kind of professional restraint that barely concealed her disgust. She actually used the phrase, attention-seeking behavior. I've been conscious for exactly 37 minutes, and I'm already learning things about my family that I apparently needed medical equipment to discover. The monitors kept beeping their electronic symphony while I processed this information. My sister, Emma, the same person who calls me crying every month about her student loan payments, had dismissed my medical emergency as drama. But wait, it gets better. Much better. The Instagram post that changed everything wasn't even tagged to hurt me specifically. Emma probably figured I'd be too unconscious to see it. The photo showed our entire family gathered around an elaborate brunch table at some upscale hotel restaurant. Mom, Dad, Emma, even our cousin Jake, who lives 2 states away. Everyone smiling, champagne flutes raised, looking like they were celebrating something wonderful. The caption read, "Brunch en famille. Sometimes you need to surround yourself with positive energy only. No drama, no toxicity, just love and laughter. Family first. Good vibes. Blessed." I stared at that screen for a solid 5 minutes, listening to my heart monitor pick up its pace. They weren't just ignoring my medical emergency, they were actively celebrating their decision to exclude me from family time. While I was literally fighting for consciousness in a hospital bed, they were toasting their drama-free lifestyle at a restaurant that charges $40 for Eggs Benedict. The timestamp showed they'd posted this 2 hours after the hospital's final call attempt. 2 hours. They had enough time to get dressed, drive across town, order drinks, and document their joy about cutting out the toxic energy, but not enough time to visit their daughter and sister in the emergency room. Dr. Martinez returned with test results, and her expression told me everything I needed to know before she spoke. "You're severely anemic," she explained, pulling up a chair beside my bed. "Your iron levels are dangerously low, which explains the fainting spell. When was the last time you had a proper physical?" I tried to remember. Between working 60-hour weeks and managing everyone else's financial crises, medical checkups had become a luxury I couldn't afford. Maybe 2 years ago? "Have you been experiencing any unusual fatigue, shortness of breath, pale skin?" She was checking items off a list that sounded uncomfortably familiar. I thought I was just stressed from work. The admission felt pathetic even as I said it. "Haley, this level of anemia doesn't develop overnight. This has been building for months, possibly longer." Her voice was gentle but firm. "You need immediate treatment and several days of observation." Several days. I was going to be here for several days, and my family was probably already planning their next drama-free outing. The irony was so thick you could spread it on toast. I was literally sick from overwork and stress, largely caused by supporting people who couldn't be bothered to support me. Dr. Martinez noticed my phone still open to the Instagram post. "Is that your family?" she asked carefully. "Technically, yes." I locked the screen and set the phone aside, though I'm starting to question the definition of that word. She nodded knowingly. Hospital social workers encounter this more often than you'd think. Sometimes medical emergencies reveal things about relationships that were already there, just hidden. The afternoon passed slowly. Nurses came and went, adjusting IV drips and checking vitals, treating me with more kindness than my own blood relatives had shown in years. Around 4 o'clock, my phone started buzzing with notifications. Text messages, but not the kind you'd expect someone to receive while hospitalized. Emma had posted 3 more photos from their family brunch, each one more elaborate than the last. Group shots, food styling, even a boomerang video of them clinking glasses. It was like watching a carefully curated performance designed to demonstrate how much better their day was without me in it. By evening, reality was sinking in with the weight of an anvil. I wasn't just physically sick. I was emotionally bankrupt from investing in people who saw me as a walking ATM rather than a human being. The nurses had been asking about visitors all day, and I'd been making increasingly creative excuses about why no one had come. "They're probably stuck in traffic," I told the evening shift nurse, knowing full well that traffic doesn't last 8 hours. "Work emergencies?" I explained to the orderly who brought dinner, as if corporate finance was somehow more critical than actual emergencies. But lying to medical staff felt worse than lying to myself, which was saying something considering how much practice I'd had with self-deception over the years. These people were taking care of me, monitoring my recovery, adjusting medications to help me heal. They deserved honesty, even if my family didn't. Around 9 p.m., my phone lit up with a call from Mom. Finally, I thought, feeling a pathetic surge of hope that maybe they'd realized their mistake. Maybe someone had guilt-tripped them into remembering they had another daughter. Maybe basic human decency had eventually kicked in. "Haley, thank goodness you answered." Mom's voice was breathless, urgent. "We need your help with something important. Not, 'How are you feeling?' or 'Are you okay?' or even, 'Sorry we missed the hospital's calls.' Just immediately into needing my help." I should have hung up right then, but curiosity is a powerful force when you're high on IV medications. "What kind of help?" I managed, my voice hoarser than expected. "The mortgage payment didn't go through this month, and we're getting calls from the bank. Can you check your account and make sure the automatic transfer is working? Dad's worried they might start charging late fees." The mortgage payment. Of course. Not a word about my health, my whereabouts, or the fact that I'd been unreachable for over 24 hours. Just concern about their house payment that comes out of my checking account because family helps family, and I'm apparently the only one in this family with a steady income and decent credit score. "Mom," I said slowly, "do you know where I am right now?" "At home, I assume. You sound tired. Are you getting sick? You should probably take some vitamin C. Have you ever experienced something so absurd that your brain actually short-circuits trying to process it?" That was this moment. My mother, who had received multiple calls from medical professionals about my condition, had somehow convinced herself that I was at home suffering from a minor cold. "I'm in the hospital," I said flatly. "I collapsed at work yesterday morning. The staff called you 12 times. Silence. Not the thoughtful pause of someone processing unexpected information, but the guilty silence of someone caught in a lie. She knew exactly where I was. They all did. "Oh, honey," she finally said, her voice shifting to the practiced tone of manufactured concern. "Why didn't you tell us sooner? We would have come right away." The gaslighting was so smooth, so automatic, that I almost admired the technique. In one sentence, she'd managed to make my medical emergency my fault for not properly communicating it, despite the hospital's 12 documented attempts to reach them. Let me paint you a picture of how I became the family's personal ATM. It didn't happen overnight. No, that would have been too obvious. This was a slow, methodical process that started the day I landed my first real job after college and made the fatal mistake of wanting to help people I loved. It began innocently enough. Dad had some temporary financial troubles after his construction company lost a major contract. "Just until I get back on my feet," he said, asking to borrow $3,000. Mom's car needed repairs that same month, and Emma was struggling with her student loan payments. Being the newly employed family member with a steady paycheck, I stepped up. The borrowing became a pattern. First, it was emergencies, then conveniences, then eventually just expectations. Somewhere along the way, borrowing turned into automatic payments coming directly out of my account. The family mortgage, car insurance for vehicles I don't drive, Mom's gym membership at the fancy country club, Emma's health insurance when she quit her retail job to focus on her art. I became the invisible financial foundation holding up their lifestyle while living in a studio apartment and driving a car held together by prayers and duct tape. They lived in a 4-bedroom house with a pool, drove newer cars than mine, took vacations to places I'd only seen in their Instagram posts. Meanwhile, I was eating ramen noodles and skipping meals to make sure their automatic payments went through. The really brilliant part of their system was how they made me feel grateful for the opportunity to support them. "We're so proud of how responsible you've become," Mom would say whenever I questioned an expense. Not everyone would be mature enough to help family like this. Dad had perfected the art of emotional manipulation, disguised as appreciation. "You're the stable one, Haley. We can always count on you." Translation: "You're the sucker who pays our bills, and we expect you to feel honored by this privilege." Emma's approach was more direct. She'd call crying about some financial crisis, lay out her problems in devastating detail, then wait for me to offer solutions. When I inevitably suggested she might need to budget better or find additional income, she'd accuse me of being judgmental and unsupportive. "Must be nice to have a fancy office job and look down on the rest of us," she'd say through strategic tears. They'd trained me beautifully. I'd learned to apologize for having financial stability, to feel guilty for questioning their spending habits, to prioritize their comfort over my own basic needs. I was the perfect financial doormat, absorbent, durable, and always available when needed. But here's what they never taught me: how to recover from iron deficiency anemia caused by literally working myself sick to support their lifestyles. That particular lesson was happening in real time, hooked up to medical equipment while they celebrated their toxicity-free family time. The nurse came to check my vitals again, and I realized something profound. These strangers, the medical staff who'd never met me before yesterday, had shown me more genuine care in 24 hours than my family had demonstrated in years. They monitored my well-being, adjusted my treatment based on my actual needs, and asked how I was feeling because they actually cared about the answer. My family monitored my bank account balance. Wednesday morning brought a parade of medical professionals and absolutely zero family visitors. Dr. Martinez returned with more test results and a concerned expression that was becoming familiar. My iron levels were so low that I needed immediate transfusions, and my vitamin D deficiency suggested I'd been pushing myself far beyond healthy limits for months. "When did you last take a vacation?" she asked while reviewing my chart. I had to think about it. Really think. "Maybe 3 years ago. I went to visit my college roommate in Denver for a long weekend." "And when did you last take time off just for yourself, not visiting anyone or handling responsibilities?" The question stumped me completely. I couldn't remember a single instance of taking time off that wasn't somehow connected to someone else's needs or schedule. Even that Denver trip had been timed around helping Sarah move apartments. "That's concerning, Haley. Your body has been sending distress signals for a while now." The fainting episode wasn't sudden. It was the final warning before complete system shutdown. While she explained my treatment plan, my phone buzzed with notifications. More Instagram posts from yesterday's brunch, now with extended family members commenting about how wonderful the gathering looked. "Aunt Carol, what a beautiful family. So glad you all had time together." Cousin Michelle, "Goals. Love seeing family prioritize what matters." The comment section was a masterclass in ironic timing. They were literally congratulating my family for excluding me while I lay in a hospital bed recovering from stress-related illness. It was like watching a live performance of everything wrong with my life, complete with audience participation. Around noon, Emma finally called. Not Mom or Dad, but Emma, probably because she'd drawn the short straw for dealing with the dramatic sister. "Haley, Mom told me you're in the hospital. Are you okay?" Her voice carried exactly the right amount of concern for someone who might be listening, but I'd grown up with Emma. I knew the difference between her genuine worry and her performance worry. "I'm recovering," I said simply, not offering details she hadn't bothered to ask for earlier. "What happened? Was it serious?" "Serious enough that the hospital tried to reach my emergency contacts 12 times. I let that sink in. Serious enough that I needed immediate medical intervention." "Oh, wow. We must have been busy. You know how crazy weekends get." The lie rolled off her tongue with practiced ease. "But you're feeling better now?" "I'm anemic from overwork and stress. I need several days of treatment." "That's rough." "Well, listen, I'm calling because there's something weird going on with your bank account. Dad tried to pay for groceries this morning and his card got declined. He's using the account you set up for household expenses, but it's saying insufficient funds." And there it was. The real reason for the call, delivered with the subtlety of a freight train. They weren't calling to check on my health. They were calling to check on their access to my money. "That's strange," I said, knowing exactly why the account was blocked. "Maybe you should ask Mom and Dad to check their own accounts first." "Come on, Haley. You know they're depending on that setup. Can you just call the bank and fix whatever glitch this is?" The audacity was breathtaking. She was literally asking me to manage their finances from my hospital bed, while simultaneously pretending my medical emergency hadn't happened. The same person who'd dismissed my collapse as attention-seeking behavior was now seeking my attention for financial problem-solving. "I'll look into it," I said, which was technically true. I would definitely be looking into some things, just not the things she expected. After ending the call, I stared at the ceiling and felt something shift inside me, not just physically from the iron transfusions, but emotionally. A clarity that had been building for hours suddenly crystallized into perfect focus. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a service they'd subscribed to. That afternoon, while receiving my second iron transfusion, I did something I should have done years ago. I opened my banking app and started documenting exactly how much money was flowing out of my accounts to support people who couldn't be bothered to visit me in the hospital. The numbers were staggering. Over the past 2 years, I'd transferred more than $80,000 to cover their expenses. Mortgage payments, car insurance, health insurance premiums, utility bills, credit card payments for purchases I'd never seen, subscriptions to services I didn't use. I was essentially funding their entire lifestyle while struggling to afford proper medical care for myself. The mortgage alone was costing me $3,200 monthly. Their house, not mine. I lived in a studio apartment that cost a quarter of what I was paying for them to live in comfort. Mom's gym membership was more expensive than my entire monthly grocery budget. Emma's health insurance, which I'd been covering since she quit her job to pursue her passion, cost more per month than I'd ever spent on my own healthcare. The beautiful irony was that her excellent coverage could have gotten her immediate access to specialists if she'd ever bothered to get preventive care, while I'd been skipping checkups because I couldn't afford them after covering everyone else's premiums. But the real revelation came when I dug deeper into the spending patterns. While I was transferring thousands monthly for their essential expenses, their social media showed a very different picture. Expensive restaurants, weekend trips, shopping hauls, concert tickets. They weren't struggling. They were just accustomed to living above their means because someone else was subsidizing the difference. That someone was me. The person currently hooked to an IV because I'd worked myself into anemia trying to maintain their lifestyle expectations. Dr. Martinez stopped by during her evening rounds and found me surrounded by financial documents I'd printed at the nurse's station. "Planning your recovery budget?" she asked with gentle humor. "Something like that," I replied, closing the laptop. "Doctor, can I ask you something?" "Of course." "In your medical opinion, how long do you think someone could maintain the stress levels that caused my current condition before facing serious long-term health consequences?" She pulled up a chair and her expression grew serious. "Haley, chronic stress at the levels your body is showing can lead to compromised immune function, cardiovascular problems, digestive issues, anxiety, depression, and a host of other complications. If you'd continued this pattern without intervention, you could have been looking at much more serious health crises." So this was actually a warning? This was your body staging an intervention because your mind wasn't listening to the smaller warnings. That night, alone with the quiet hum of medical equipment and the distant sounds of hospital activity, I made a decision that would change everything. I opened my banking app again, but this time I wasn't just reviewing the damage. I was taking action. First, I changed all my account passwords. Then I removed every automatic payment authorization that wasn't directly related to my own bills. No more mortgage payments for a house I didn't live in. No more insurance premiums for cars I didn't drive. No more gym memberships, streaming services, and credit card payments for purchases I'd never approved. The beautiful thing about being the account holder is that you don't need anyone's permission to stop letting them spend your money. 3 clicks. And suddenly, I was no longer funding a lifestyle I couldn't afford to participate in. I should have felt guilty. I should have worried about how they'd react. I should have considered their feelings and needs and all the arguments they'd inevitably make about family obligations and responsibilities. Instead, I felt lighter than I had in years. Thursday morning brought unexpected visitors, but not the ones you'd expect. My boss, Janet, and 2 coworkers showed up with flowers and genuine concern about my recovery. People I saw 40 hours per week at work had driven across town to check on my well-being, while people who shared my DNA couldn't be bothered to travel 20 minutes from their house. "We brought your laptop," Janet said, setting a bag on the visitor chair, "but I want you to promise me you won't even look at it until you're completely recovered." "The Hendricks account can wait," added Marcus, my cubicle neighbor. "Your health is more important than quarterly reports." "How long have you been feeling unwell?" asked Sarah from HR. "You've seemed exhausted lately, but we didn't realize it was this serious." Their genuine concern was overwhelming. These were professional relationships, not family bonds, yet they'd shown more care in 30 minutes than my blood relatives had shown in days. The contrast was so stark, it almost felt surreal. After they left, Dr. Martinez arrived with what she clearly thought was good news. Your iron levels are responding well to treatment, she announced, checking my latest lab results. You should be able to go home tomorrow afternoon. Home. The word felt strange now. Was I going home to my small studio apartment where I'd been slowly killing myself to support people who saw my medical emergency as an inconvenience? Or was I going home to something different? A life where my well-being actually mattered. Around 11, my phone started ringing. Dad this time, and his tone was decidedly different from Mom's manufactured sweetness or Emma's entitled demands. Haley Elizabeth Mitchell, what the hell is going on with our accounts? No greeting, no inquiry about my health, no acknowledgement that I was calling from a hospital bed, just immediate aggression about money. Jesus of my full name, the way he'd addressed me as a child when I was in trouble, was clearly intended to shame me into submission. Hello to you too, Dad. I'm recovering well, thanks for asking. Cut the attitude. The mortgage payment bounced, the insurance is threatening cancellation, and Emma can't access her healthcare portal. Did you screw something up with the bank transfers? His assumption that I must have accidentally disrupted their financial arrangements was telling. It hadn't occurred to him that the disruption might be intentional, that his daughter might have finally grown tired of being treated like a corporate sponsor rather than family. I didn't screw anything up, I said calmly. I made some changes to my account access permissions. What kind of changes? The kind where people don't get to spend my money without my direct approval. The silence stretched long enough that I wondered if the call had dropped. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a tone I'd never heard before. Not anger, but something closer to panic. Haley, we can discuss any concerns you have about the financial arrangements, but you can't just cut off essential payments without warning. The mortgage is due next week. Then you should probably figure out how to pay it. With what money? You know our situation. Your situation is that you've been living off my income while I worked myself into the hospital. My situation is that I'm recovering from a stress-related illness caused by supporting people who can't be bothered to visit me when I'm sick. Another long pause. When he spoke again, the manipulation tactics shifted from aggression to guilt. Honey, I know you're upset about us not visiting yet, but you have to understand we've been worried sick. We didn't want to overwhelm you with visitors while you were recovering. Worried sick. The phrase was so laughably inappropriate that I almost started laughing right there in my hospital bed. They'd been worried sick enough to throw elaborate brunches and post celebration photos, but too overwhelmed with concern to pick up when medical professionals called 12 times. Dad, stop talking. Excuse me? What do you think will happen next? Drop your predictions in the comments below. I said stop talking. I'm going to say something and you're going to listen without interrupting, because I'm about to explain how things are going to work from now on. Friday morning, I woke up feeling stronger than I had in months. Not just because of the iron transfusions, but because I'd slept through the night without anxiety dreams about missed payments or financial emergencies. For the first time in years, I'd gone to sleep knowing that my bank account was actually mine. Doctor. Martinez arrived with my discharge papers and a prescription regimen that would help me rebuild my depleted iron stores. I'm also referring you to a counselor who specializes in stress management and healthy boundary setting, she said, handing me a business card. Recovery isn't just physical when work-related stress is involved. Thank you, I said, meaning it more than she probably realized. For everything. Haley, I've been practicing medicine for 15 years, and I've seen this pattern too many times. People who give everything they have to others until they literally collapse from exhaustion. The good news is that you're young enough to recover fully and change course before permanent damage occurs. She paused at the door. The people who love you will support your recovery. The people who don't will resent your boundaries. That information alone will tell you everything you need to know about your relationships. Her words echoed in my mind as I packed my few belongings. I'd been discharged with instructions to take 2 weeks off work for recovery, to rest, eat iron-rich foods, and avoid high-stress situations. Basically, the opposite of everything I'd been doing for the past several years. The Uber ride home was surreal. I'd been gone for 4 days, but it felt like months had passed. My studio apartment looked exactly the same, but I saw it differently now. This wasn't just the place where I slept between work shifts and financial stress management sessions. This was my home, my space, my refuge. My phone had been buzzing constantly with notifications I'd been ignoring. Messages, missed calls, voicemails from Mom, Dad, and Emma, each one escalating in urgency as they realized their financial pipeline had been permanently shut off. The progression was almost comical in its predictability. Hey honey, just checking on a small banking issue. Haley, we really need to talk about these account problems. This is getting serious. Please call us back immediately. Emergency. Need you to call ASAP about urgent family matter. I made myself a proper meal. The first one I'd planned and prepared for myself without worrying about budget constraints in longer than I could remember. While eating, I finally listened to their voicemails. Mom's messages started concerned and gradually became frantic. She'd apparently spent considerable time on the phone with various customer service departments, trying to figure out why automatic payments were being declined. The panic in her voice when she realized she couldn't access our accounts was almost entertaining. Dad's voicemails were angrier, full of demands and threats about family responsibilities and legal obligations. He'd clearly done some research and discovered that since all the accounts were solely in my name, they had no legal recourse to force access. His final message was particularly revealing. "Fine, Haley, you want to play hardball? Two can play that game." Emma's messages were the most manipulative, alternating between tears and accusations. She'd tried guilt. "How could you abandon family when we need you most?" Self-victimization. "I can't believe my own sister would destroy my life like this." And finally, threats. "When you come to your senses, don't expect us to forgive you easily." Not one message expressed concern about my health or recovery. Not one person asked how I was feeling or when I'd be released from the hospital. Every single communication was focused entirely on money and their loss of access to it. Around 6 p.m., someone started pounding on my apartment door. Aggressive, demanding knocks that made it clear this wasn't a friendly visit. Through the peephole, I could see Emma and Dad standing in the hallway, both looking furious. "Open the door, Haley," Emma shouted. "We know you're in there." I sat on my couch and didn't move. After supporting them financially for years, I didn't owe them access to my home just because they demanded it. The knocking continued for several minutes, accompanied by increasingly hostile demands that I stop being childish and face them like an adult. Finally, they gave up and left, but not before Emma's parting shot through the door. "This isn't over! You can't just abandon your family!" The irony was breathtaking. I was accused of abandoning them by the same people who'd abandoned me in a hospital bed to enjoy bottomless mimosas and drama-free family time. Saturday morning brought a new strategy from my family: the intervention. They showed up together this time, Mom, Dad, and Emma, armed with coffee and pastries like they were attending a grief counseling session. I watched them through my peephole, coordinating their approach on my doorstep. This time, I answered. "Before anyone says anything," I announced, standing in my doorway without inviting them in, "I want you to know that I'm recording this conversation." It was a lie, but a strategic one. The immediate shift in their demeanor told me everything I needed to know about their planned approach. Dad's aggressive posture softened, Mom's rehearsed tears dried up, and Emma's entitled expression became cautious. "Honey, we just want to talk," Mom said in her sweetest voice. "Can we come in and work this out like a family?" "We can talk right here. The neighbors will hear," Dad protested. "Then you should probably keep your voices down." Emma pushed forward, clearly frustrated with the polite approach. "Haley, this is ridiculous. You can't just cut us off without explanation. We're family." "You're right," I agreed. "I should have explained myself clearly before making changes. Here's your explanation. I nearly died from stress-related anemia caused by working myself sick to support people who couldn't be bothered to visit me in the hospital. That situation is no longer sustainable." "You didn't nearly die," Emma scoffed. "Don't be dramatic. Would you like to see my medical records?" "Doctor." Martinez explained that chronic stress at these levels can cause serious long-term health problems if not addressed immediately. Mom stepped closer, her voice taking on the worried tone she used when she needed something. "We had no idea you were that sick. If you'd told us you were struggling, the hospital told you. 12 times. Medical professionals called your phones and explained that your daughter had collapsed and needed immediate care. Your response was to tell them I was being dramatic." The guilt trip strategy shifted to rationalization. Dad cleared his throat and launched into what was clearly a prepared speech. "Haley, we understand you're upset about the communication breakdown, but you have to see this from our perspective. Cutting off financial support without warning puts us in an impossible situation." "What perspective should I see? The perspective where your daughter's medical emergency is less important than brunch reservations? Or the perspective where I exist solely to fund your lifestyle?" "That's not fair," Emma snapped. "We've supported you emotionally for years." The claim was so absurd that I actually laughed. When? When exactly have any of you supported me emotionally? When I worked overtime to cover your mortgage payments? When I skipped meals to afford your insurance premiums? When I drove my car into the ground because I couldn't afford repairs after paying for yours? They exchanged glances, clearly unprepared for specific questions about their support claims. "We're not asking for charity," Dad said, changing tactics again. "We're asking you to honor the commitments you made to this family." "What commitments? I don't remember signing any contracts to be your personal bank account." "Families take care of each other," Mom added weakly. "You're absolutely right. Families do take care of each other. Where were you when I needed taking care of?" The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, with them cycling through every manipulation technique in their playbook: guilt, anger, false promises, emotional blackmail, threats, and finally desperate pleading. What they didn't do was acknowledge my health crisis, express genuine remorse for ignoring my medical emergency, or demonstrate any understanding of how their behavior had affected me. When they finally left, defeated and empty-handed, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: peace. Not the temporary relief of solving someone else's financial crisis, but actual peace about my own choices and boundaries. That evening, I did something radical. I ordered takeout from an expensive restaurant, opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion, and watched movies until midnight without checking my bank balance or worrying about anyone else's bills. For the first time in years, I went to sleep knowing that my money was mine, my time was mine, and my recovery was my priority. 2 weeks into my medical leave, I was physically stronger and emotionally clearer than I'd been in years. The iron supplements were working, my energy levels were stabilizing, and most importantly, I wasn't waking up every morning with anxiety about financial obligations that weren't actually mine. My counseling sessions with Dr. Reeves had been revelatory. She'd helped me understand that my family's behavior followed a classic pattern of financial abuse disguised as family obligation. "They've conditioned you to feel guilty for having boundaries," she explained during our third session. "The fact that you're questioning whether you're being selfish for protecting your health shows how effectively they've manipulated your normal responses." I'd also been doing research about financial boundaries and family relationships. Turns out, what I thought was normal family support was actually a well-documented form of exploitation. Adult children aren't responsible for their parents' mortgages, siblings aren't obligated to fund each other's lifestyles, and family helps family doesn't mean one person bankrolls everyone else's poor financial decisions. The revelation was both liberating and infuriating. I'd spent years believing I was being a good daughter and sister, when I was actually being a well-trained victim. My phone had finally stopped buzzing with constant calls and messages. The initial panic phase had ended, and they'd moved into what I recognized as strategic silence. This was their way of punishing me for setting boundaries, making me worry about their well-being so I'd cave and restore their access to my accounts. It wasn't working. Every day that passed without their demands and financial emergencies was another day of peace. I was sleeping better, eating actual meals instead of grabbing snacks between crisis management sessions, and rediscovering hobbies I'd abandoned years ago, when every spare moment was consumed by their needs. Wednesday afternoon, I received an unexpected call from my cousin Jake. Unlike my immediate family, Jake had always been genuinely kind to me, though we rarely spoke since he lived across the country. "Haley, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be honest with me," he said without preamble. "Are you okay? Like, really okay?" The question caught me off guard. "I'm recovering from some health issues, but yes, I'm okay." "Why?" "Because your parents and Emma have been calling everyone in the family telling them you've had some kind of mental breakdown. They're saying you've cut them off financially and emotionally, that you're acting erratic and might need psychiatric help." The smear campaign. I should have expected this tactic, but hearing about it still stung. They were literally trying to convince our extended family that I was mentally unstable because I'd stopped letting them spend my money. "Jake, can I tell you what actually happened?" "I was hoping you would, because their story isn't adding up. They keep talking about how worried they are about you, but they also keep mentioning specific dollar amounts you're withholding from them. If someone in my family was having a mental health crisis, I don't think my first concern would be about money." I explained everything: the medical emergency, the ignored calls, the Instagram posts, the financial exploitation, the complete lack of concern for my actual well-being. Jake listened without interrupting, occasionally asking clarifying questions that showed he was actually processing the information. Jesus Christ, Haley. I had no idea it was that bad. Neither did I, really, until I was forced to step back and see the pattern clearly. For what it's worth, I'm proud of you for setting boundaries. What they've been doing isn't normal family behavior. The validation from someone who knew all of us was more powerful than I'd expected. Jake had grown up with this family, attended the same gatherings, witnessed the same dynamics. If he could see the problems clearly, then I wasn't crazy or selfish or ungrateful. "There's something else you should know," Jake continued. "They're planning some kind of family meeting. Aunt Linda mentioned that your parents are gathering support to help you through your crisis. I think they're trying to organize an intervention where everyone confronts you about abandoning family. An intervention. They were actually planning to use our extended family as weapons in their campaign to restore access to my bank account." The audacity was breathtaking, but it also clarified something important. This was far from over. "Thanks for the warning, Jake. And thanks for calling to get my side of the story instead of just believing theirs. Families should look out for each other," he said. And for once, those words actually meant what they were supposed to mean. The family intervention was scheduled for Sunday afternoon at my parents' house, the house I'd been paying the mortgage on for over 2 years. The irony wasn't lost on me that they were hosting their intervention in a space I'd financially provided, but had never been welcome to consider home. Jake had texted me the details after receiving the group message that went out to all extended family members. The invitation described a support gathering to help me through my financial and emotional crisis. According to the message, I was experiencing stress-related mental health issues that were causing me to make irrational decisions about money and family relationships. The manipulation was masterful. They'd reframed my boundary setting as a mental health crisis, my financial independence as irrational behavior, and their exploitation as loving family support I was wrongfully rejecting. Anyone who didn't know the full story would see them as concerned relatives trying to help a troubled family member. I wasn't planning to attend, obviously. Why would I walk into an ambush designed to pressure me back into financial servitude? But Friday afternoon, I received a call that changed everything. "Haley, this is your grandmother's neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. I'm calling because your grandmother asked me to reach out to you." My heart sank. Grandma Rose was 86 and the only family member who'd ever shown me unconditional love. If they'd dragged her into their manipulation campaign, it represented a new low. "Is she okay?" I asked, genuinely worried. "Physically, yes, but she's very upset about something involving your family. She asked me to tell you that she needs to speak with you before Sunday, and that it's very important." I drove to Grandma Rose's house that evening, prepared for the worst. Maybe they'd convinced her I was having a breakdown. Maybe she'd been pressured to participate in their intervention. Maybe she genuinely believed I was wrong to cut them off. What I found instead was a sharp, angry woman who'd figured out exactly what her son and granddaughters had been doing. "Sit down, sweetheart," she said, gesturing to her kitchen table where she'd laid out documents and photographs. "We need to talk about what's been happening in this family." The documents were financial statements and insurance papers. The photographs were printouts of social media posts, including the infamous brunch picture that had started my awakening. "Your mother came to me last week crying about how you'd abandoned the family during a financial crisis," Grandma Rose began, her voice carrying a steel I'd rarely heard. "She wanted me to co-sign a loan to cover their mortgage while they worked things out with you." I stared at the papers, seeing loan applications with my grandmother's information partially filled out. I asked her to explain exactly what kind of financial arrangement you'd had with them, thinking maybe you'd borrowed money you couldn't repay. What she described made me sick to my stomach. Grandma Rose had done her own investigation. She'd looked up the mortgage records and discovered I was listed as the sole income source for the loan modification they'd received last year. She'd called their insurance company and learned I was paying premiums for policies that didn't even include me as a beneficiary. "Haley, they've been using you like a personal ATM while living a lifestyle they can't afford. That's not family support. That's financial abuse." She pulled out the social media printouts. "And this? Posting pictures of family gatherings while you were in the hospital? Your father called me that Saturday morning asking for money for their brunch bill while you were unconscious in the emergency room." The revelation hit me like a physical blow. They'd been asking other family members for money to fund their celebration of excluding me from family time while I was receiving medical treatment for stress-related illness they'd caused. "Grandma, I had no idea they'd involved you in this." "Oh, they haven't just involved me. They've been calling everyone in the family with sob stories about how ungrateful and selfish you've become. Your Aunt Linda told me they're planning some kind of group confrontation to pressure you into seeing reason." She leaned forward, taking my hands in hers. "Sweetheart, I've lived long enough to see every kind of family dysfunction imaginable. What they're doing to you isn't love, it's exploitation." That night, Grandma Rose and I developed a plan that would end their manipulation campaign once and for all. She'd attend their intervention, but not as their ally. "It's time this family learned the difference between supporting each other and using each other," she said with a smile that reminded me where I'd inherited my own backbone. Sunday afternoon was going to be very interesting. The intervention took place in the living room I'd been furnishing with my mortgage payments, surrounded by relatives who'd been fed carefully crafted lies about my mental state and family abandonment. I arrived 20 minutes after the scheduled start time, walking into a room full of concerned faces and judgmental expressions. Mom immediately launched into her performance. "Haley, sweetheart, we're all here because we love you and we're worried about the decisions you've been making. This isn't like you. Cutting off family, isolating yourself, making financial choices that hurt the people who care about you most." The murmurs of agreement from aunts and uncles who'd heard only her version of events were exactly what she'd orchestrated. I was surrounded by my own family members who'd been convinced I was having a breakdown because I'd stopped bankrolling my parents' lifestyle. "We want to help you through whatever you're going through," Dad added, his voice carrying practiced concern. "But first, you need to acknowledge that your recent behavior has consequences for more than just yourself." Emma sat in the corner looking victimized and traumatized, probably rehearsing her speech about how my abandonment had destroyed her mental health and financial security. I remained standing near the doorway, taking in the entire scene. A room full of family members who'd been manipulated into attending an intervention designed to pressure me back into financial servitude. The audacity was almost admirable in its completeness. Before anyone says anything else, I announced, pulling out my phone, I'd like everyone to see something. I'd prepared a detailed presentation over the past week, working with Dr. Reeves to organize the information in a way that would be impossible to dismiss or reinterpret. Bank statements showing the $80,000 I'd transferred to support them while living in a studio apartment. Medical records documenting my stress-related anemia and the hospital's attempted emergency calls. Screenshots of their social media posts celebrating their drama-free family time while I was unconscious and receiving medical treatment. This is what you're calling abandonment, I said, projecting the financial documents onto their TV screen. 2 years of mortgage payments for a house I don't live in. Car insurance for vehicles I don't drive. Health insurance premiums for people who dismissed my medical emergency as attention-seeking behavior. The room grew quiet as relatives who'd expected to comfort a troubled family member instead found themselves looking at evidence of systematic financial exploitation. Grandma Rose stood up from her chair in the corner. I have something to add to this conversation. She'd brought her own evidence. Copies of loan applications where they'd tried to use her as collateral for covering expenses I'd been paying. Records of phone calls where they'd asked her for money to fund recreational activities while claiming I'd abandoned them financially. Your son and granddaughters came to me asking for money to pay for a restaurant bill, she announced to the room, while Haley was in the hospital recovering from stress-related illness. They weren't asking for money to visit her or support her recovery. They were asking for money to celebrate not having to deal with her. The intervention was rapidly becoming an exposure. Aunt Linda looked horrified as she realized she'd been recruited as a weapon in a campaign to force me back into financial servitude. Uncle Mark was staring at the documents with the expression of someone recalculating everything he'd been told. Mom tried to regain control of the narrative. This is all very complicated, and we can work out financial arrangements. But the real issue is Haley's refusal to communicate with family. I communicated from a hospital bed while you were posting Instagram photos, I replied calmly. The medical staff communicated through 12 phone calls that you ignored or dismissed. What kind of communication are you looking for? Dad's voice rose defensively. We had no way of knowing it was that serious. The emergency room staff specifically told you I had collapsed and needed immediate medical attention. How much more serious does it need to be before family shows up? The room erupted in uncomfortable murmurs as the assembled relatives began to understand they'd been recruited under false pretenses. This wasn't an intervention for someone having a mental breakdown. This was a confrontation designed to restore access to money they'd been taking without giving anything back. Emma finally spoke up, her voice shaking with anger rather than trauma. Fine. Maybe we made mistakes, but that doesn't give you the right to cut us off completely. Family is supposed to forgive and move forward. I looked around the room at faces that ranged from supportive to confused to ashamed. These people had been willing to stage an intervention because they genuinely thought I needed help. Now they were witnessing the truth about relationships they'd only seen from the outside. You're right, Emma. Family is supposed to forgive and move forward. But family is also supposed to show up when someone is in the hospital. Family is supposed to care more about well-being than bank account access. Family is supposed to support each other instead of using each other. I picked up my bag and headed toward the door. I'm moving forward, just not in the direction any of you expected. As I reached the doorway, Grandma Rose called out, Haley, wait. She walked over and hugged me tightly. I'm proud of you for choosing yourself, she whispered. It's about time someone in this family learned that being related doesn't give people the right to use you. 6 months later, I was living in a one-bedroom apartment I actually liked, driving a reliable car I'd been able to afford without supporting 3 additional adults, and working a job that challenged me without killing me. My iron levels were normal, my stress was manageable, and my bank account was finally mine. The family members who'd attended that intervention had drawn their own conclusions about what they'd witnessed. Some reached out to apologize for being manipulated into participating. Others, like Jake and Grandma Rose, became regular parts of my life in healthier ways. Mom, Dad, and Emma eventually figured out how to pay their own bills. It turned out they were perfectly capable of managing their finances when they couldn't rely on someone else to cover their poor decisions. The mortgage got refinanced, the insurance payments got prioritized, and Emma even found a job with benefits. They occasionally sent messages through other family members about wanting to rebuild our relationship, but their definition of rebuilding always involved financial support flowing in one direction. I was no longer interested in relationships that came with price tags attached. If this story resonated with you, make sure to like and subscribe for more stories about choosing yourself when the people who should support you won't. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your family is refuse to enable their dysfunction, even if it means accepting that you might not be family to them at all. And remember, you're not responsible for funding other people's lifestyles just because you share DNA. Blood might be thicker than water, but boundaries are stronger than both.